Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Welcome to all of you. We'll get started in just another minute or so. All right. Welcome. And thank you all so much for being here this evening. My name is Leah Barnett. I work for Wild Earth Guardians on various public lands policy and advocacy issues, mostly in and around the greater Gila region of Southwest New Mexico. A few quick logistics before we get started. This webinar will be recorded and it'll be available on our YouTube page if you have anyone who might be interested in watching it at a later date. We'll have some time for questions at the end of the panel discussion. So please enter any questions that come up into the Q&A feature, and we'll get to those towards the end. We'll start with a little bit about the book, First and Wildest, and then we'll watch the film, No Fool's Gold, and then we'll finish with the panel discussion and Q&A. So I just want to start by saying I've spent a while now considering how best to take on this long overdue ritual of acknowledging the original inhabitants of these places we live and work and play. And it feels a little fraught because how can one adequately convey or even begin to reckon with a history of violent dispossession and genocide that pervades our very presence in these places? We can't, I certainly can't. But what I can do, I think, is attempt to recognize what this Native presence and legacy that has preceded me has meant in the context of my relationship to place and to home. I feel so deeply connected to these landscapes of my home state of New Mexico. They have deeply shaped who and what I am in the world. And I know somewhere deep in my bones that I owe a huge debt of gratitude and recognition to those who have known, loved, and stewarded these landscapes for millennia before I was here. This land carries their hearts and their hands and their wisdom. It is imbued with their presence and care and beauty. So I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge the Tiwa and Pueblo peoples and their ties to this place that we call Santa Fe, and the Chiricahua Apache Nation and their ties to the greater Gila region. And along those lines, you know, it's exceedingly rare these days, I feel like, in my experience, to meet someone whose actions more so than their words, exemplify a certain reverence and respect for the land. And in this case, that's a special testament because, as any of you who have read First and Wildest or who know Joe's signs, you know that he is perhaps a man of few, but always authentic, thoughtful, and often galvanizing words. So to say that his actions speak louder than his words is saying quite a lot. So Joe, we're always grateful for all that you bring to these spaces. Would you please honor us with an opening prayer?
Leah. And thank everybody for being here. I'm going to go off camera to do this this prayer, so you guys bear with me. Ya ay hanadaje yusen dano with destiny he shishagasha shiki biaguzhu. Ayago yusen onithayu yusen hadag yusen shigona ay nagodzanya yegolsi tawaji nilti base mbatsu nabeten oka yusen. I, your grandfather, ask for prayers for my family, my mother who's passed away, my father, my brothers, my nephews, my nieces, that you pity them, that you help them. Ask for prayers for my relations, my extended families, that you pity them, that you help them. Ask for prayers for people in the hospital, people in jails, people traveling, that you pity them, that you help them always return home safe. We ask for prayers for this land that we're here only to honor and we're here to protect. And that we see this land as a parent, that we look for guidance, because only this land will tell us how to behave and how to act in front of it and how to act in front of each other.
Thank you so much, Joe. So just before we get started, a little bit about Guardians. We were formed in 1989, at that time largely responding to some large logging projects that were being proposed for the Santa Fe National Forest that threatened populations of Mexican spotted owl. We have grown quite a bit since then to be a region-wide organization of, I think we're close to 40 people at this point, working to protect and restore the wild places, wild rivers, wildlife, and health of the American West. Guardian started working in the Gila in the early 90s, at that time largely litigating to keep cows out of riparian areas, and later again working to ensure adequate protections for the Mexican spotted owl. These days, we work on a whole host of issues, from ongoing Mexican spotted owl and Mexican gray wolf advocacy to voluntary grazing permit retirement, to neat advocacy through literature projects like the anthology, which we'll hear more about in just a moment. And for those of you who don't know, the Gila Wilderness was the world's first administratively designated wilderness back in June of 1924. So we're coming up on a big centennial birthday, which is basically why we're here tonight, to kick off a countdown to the Gila as it turns 100. So glad you all could join for the celebration. And if you'd like to learn more about Guardian's work in the Gila, we'll post a link to our webpage in the chat. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce Will Neville Raven. Will directs fundraising and community development at Torrey House Press. He works with publisher Kirsten Allen and creative director Kathleen Metcalf on acquisitions, always seeking to advance Torrey House's mission and impact. Throughout his career, he has helped organizations expand their capabilities, engage new audiences, and tell stories that change the world. He received a BA in theater from Davidson College and a master's in political management from the George Washington University. A Utah native and lifelong book nerd, Will return to Salt Lake City in 2020 with his husband, their young son, and very old cat. Welcome, Will. So glad you could join us.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe, for that beautiful prayer, for bringing us into this space in such a wonderful way. Thank you for the invitation to collaborate, which started a couple years ago. And certainly thank you to everyone who is taking the time to join us here this evening. I am co-executive director and executive editor of Torrey House Press. My co-executive director, Kirsten Allen, is on an airplane back from a trip for her father's 80th birthday as we speak, but sends her regards as well. And we just really want to take this as a moment both to reflect on one of the most successful strategic partnerships in our 13-year history, which led to this wonderful book, First and Wildest, The Gila at 100, and to think through where we're all headed from here, not only where Torrey House is headed, where Wild Earth Guardians is going, what we can all do together. And that together absolutely includes each and every one of you, those of you who may end up watching this later, those of you who will be badgered by someone on this webinar, as a friend to join them in advocating for the Gila Wilderness as it approaches 100. Torrey House Press was founded in 2010. We became a nonprofit in 2015. And from the very beginning has focused on books that put the land and the peoples of the land and how land and place bring us together and really define so much of the human experience. We've been exploring that through creative nonfiction, through fiction, and also through anthologies like First and Wildest. And our anthologies have really been at the heart of the advocacy work that we have done over the years. And First and Wildest was such a phenomenal opportunity to partner with Wild Earth Guardians, not only on conceiving the project, but on having a project that had such a clear reason to be. As we've been talking about our mission more and more in this past couple of years, as we're approaching our 15th anniversary, we're starting to talk about our work in terms of books that change the world, right? And what does it mean to have a book live into its full potential? And we are deep believers in the power of story. In addition to Joe's contributions to this book, which was edited by Elizabeth Hightower Allen, it features a number of names that you might recognize and, depending on the day, may feel various ways about, including now Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, former Senator Tom Udall, Renata Golden, Laura Paskus, Beto O'Rourke, Joy Harjo, Pam Houston, and many, many others. It was a fantastic experience to be able to reach out to so many voices from so many different places around the country and who have really different experiences with the Gila itself. And one of the things that we know clearly about the advocacy and policy environment in the US is it takes 50% plus one to count to a majority. If we're talking about the Senate, the math is a little bit different. But so many of those people are from places in the country that don't have the lived experience of the land or the history or the connection with different types of place. And we wanted to conceive of First and Wildest as a way to bring those stories to life and to be able to, in some small, insignificant way, put the Gila Wilderness into the hands of some of the people with the power to help not only protect it, but to help it thrive in the years to come. And so the book itself came out in May of last year and immediately took its first road trip flight to Washington, D.C., where Kirsten and some colleagues from Wild Earth Guardians were able to meet with elected representatives, with their staff, have an event at the National Press Club, and literally distribute copies of this book to the offices of every member of Congress, as well as to some key policymakers in various parts of the administration. And we know and we have heard in the communication sense that it has an impact. It's something that sits there as a reminder, not only of a place you might know, but of what you don't know. And as we approach this 100th anniversary, we are really excited to look for new ways to bring this book to life, new ways to engage with all of those who contributed to it and have contributed to its success from outside the pages, and also to be able to share more stories, to be able to gather in person in a way that hasn't necessarily been possible, to be able to gather at the Gila, to be able to bring sort of the ethos of everyone on this call to the halls of power and to all of our everyday citizen brothers and sisters, so that we can join together to protect this as a particularly special and wondrous place. It is, I really cherish, Joe, something that you said in your opening prayer, this idea of looking to the land for guidance. And I think that is the spirit that we hope to live up to in this project and in all of our work. We are enormously proud that this book has been awarded the New Mexico Arizona Book Award for nonfiction last year. It is a finalist for the Forward Indie Book Awards. We find out next week whether or not it will pick that one up as well. But mostly it's just a beautiful read. For anyone who loves the land, for anyone who loves what language can do. It's a book to curl up with inside in the rain or outside in the sun. And I hope that if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, that you would take an opportunity to do so. We'll drop this into the chat as well, but if you use the discount code PUBLICLANDS at torreyhouse.org, that will give you a 20% discount, and we would be thrilled to send you a copy or send you multiple copies if you would like to give it out to folks that you know. So thank you again for the invitation. Thank you for the partnership. And I think to all of us, thank you to the future that we're building together. I can't wait to see what this 99th year brings for the Gila as we approach the actual centennial. I think it's going to be a fantastic moment to really rally around this place, not only for everything that makes it unique, but as an example of how communities can come together to protect lands and culture and memory, both of the past and memories for the future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Will. That was so beautifully said. And maybe you can drop a link into the chat where folks can buy the book and throw that code in there as well. Would be amazing. And just in case you haven't seen the trailer for the book, we're going to take a quick watch right now.
This book is a collection of stories from individuals that hopefully can inspire others to write their own stories down.
Wild landscapes seen and unseen, wild landscapes carried home. So we learn to live in the world. So we carry the Gila Wilderness, a stone in our pocket.
We stayed up telling ghost stories and making late night tacos. And for the first time for many of these youths, we saw the Milky Way in all its glory.
A river that flows freely, water that bears our weight when we surrender to it. This land shows us love, teaches us love, and loves us back.
And the spirit of Geronimo, Guayacla, tugs at every part of my soul. He haunts the long, hard silences of this Gila wilderness.
The most interesting challenge we have is finding our place on this planet. If we want wilderness and wild places, it will not be an accident.
Does the snake marvel at the beauty of the wilderness? Does the bear make metaphors of the river? Does the mountain lion stop to admire the mountain?
As Creator gave it to us, it is in its perfect form. We need to take care of it. This is Apache land, Ndebina.
So if you haven't read the book, grab a copy. It is beautiful. And yeah, like Will said, it has a whole life ahead of it that we have yet to realize. So it's exciting to just see how it continues to exist into the future and serve as a tool for advocacy for protections for the Greater Gila. So before we watch No Fool's Gold, I want to try to connect some of the threads of why we're here, mashing these two storytelling efforts together. When I first started this job, I had no prior experience working in conservation. I had spent the better part of 20 years waiting tables, which, as it turns out, is a great way to fund a lifestyle dedicated to a lot of time outside, as much time as possible, which was kind of my goal at that phase of my life, which is actually a great introduction to public lands advocacy. What better way to learn to love something and grow a passion for protecting it than exploring it and coming to define oneself by the endless lessons, challenges, and gifts it bestows. So when I came to Guardians, I was full of the world and freshly inoculated with social science theory, having finally finished my undergraduate degree 17 years after graduating high school in linguistic anthropology. And as you can imagine, as those two identities blended together, I had a lot of ideas about how words and stories and storytelling are integral to fostering a new land ethic, and the kind of sense of place, and doing all that at a scale and on a timeline that allows for the kinds of rapid change we need if we are to save ourselves and some iota of the biotic community we share this incredible planet with. And then I met the Gila, this incredibly vast, rugged, stunning landscape that continues to completely blow my mind with its beauty, solitude, expansive and sometimes uncomfortable wildness. And then I started meeting the people of the Gila, the Apache who are so deeply connected to this place, the residents of Silver City and Glenwood and Kingston and Magdalena and Gila Hot Springs who love this place and tend to it in big ways and small to ensure its protection, and all the other Gila lovers around the country and the world who get that glimmer in their eye when you mention the name Gila. We are all full of stories of the Gila. And then my brilliant and very generous manager, Madeline Carey, had the idea for an anthology. And with the masterly guidance of the folks at Torrey House Press and the extraordinary wisdom and editorial powers of Elizabeth Hightower Allen, First and Wildest was born. And then I was connected with the concerned community members in the tiny town of Mugillo, New Mexico. And I learned about their stories of opposition to a new exploratory mining operation. And we decided that a powerful tool to educate, empower, and mobilize others in this fight would be a documentary film telling their stories. And so No Fool's Gold was created, and all these stories folded in on each other, grew louder, ever amplifying a frequency that resonated with what I've come to identify as love. Because that's ultimately what this work is about. At Guardians, we see a vision for the Greater Gila landscape that continues to gather these stories and this love in service of a unified vision for protection that is something bigger and bolder than we've done before. It's something that takes the past 100 years of the wilderness ideal and expands upon it in a way that both adequately redresses the dispossession and genocide that mark the first chapter of the history of our public lands, and one which addresses the threats of the 21st century, namely climate breakdown and biodiversity collapse. This is what the Gila asks of us. How can our stories of this land be vehicles for change? How can we find the common narratives that bring us together rather than pull us apart, so that we can protect this place for all future generations, human and more than human communities who will also come to love it? Place-based stories seem a fitting place to start. So with all that said, let's hear the stories of love from our friends in Mogollon. So now we will watch No Fool's Gold.
It's not a greed thing, it's gold fever. It's some element that gets into people's head, the power of that gold. I don't know what it is. When somebody comes into your backyard and starts digging around and they don't say one peep to you, it's an alarm bell, big time.
This was a mining community. It was nothing, and then it was everything, and then it went back to nothing. These days at Mogollon, there's only a handful of neighbors. They're self-employed, independent artists or craftsmen, or retired.
The people that reside here in Mogollon are longtime residents. They're vested in this community, and I don't only mean the human community, but the ecosystem itself.
This guy. Colorado? The mining guys. You know, they're just doing a job. But I don't like what they're doing.
Without cutting your finger off. Or the life of the innkeeper. Oh, look at all the things. We need a map. Here's one right here that we can look at. Welcome to the Gila Wilderness. Coffee cup in hand, map in hand. We're ready to go. We're ready to go on an excursion. Here's the town site of Mogollon. Here's Silver Creek Inn right here. It used to be called the J.P. Holland Store. During the heyday of the mining activity, which was in the early turn of the 1900s, there was probably close to 5,000 people who occupied this whole area in here. Now the new drilling that Sigma Silver Company is doing is right here, right at Graveyard Saddle, right in here. Last spring, we ran into a survey party, and they said, yeah, the Sumer Silver Corporation is coming here. I said, oh yeah? First thing we heard of it. This truck is a 4,000-gallon water tender, gross weight 58,000 pounds, and Sumer Silver Corporation uses this truck for water supply to the drill site. But yet it's posted at the bottom of the road on both sides, load limit 7 tons. They're taking 150 gallons of diesel and 20,000 gallons of water a day and dumping it at our watershed. Unless they're forced to, they're not going to say anything to the local people who they're going to directly affect. My name is Stanley King. I'm sole proprietor of Silver Creek Inn, Mogollon, New Mexico. In 1979, I showed up living out the back of a pickup truck, and when I saw this building, it was trashed. There was knob and tube wiring here and there, no plumbing. I signed on the dotted line right away. I knew that it was where I was supposed to be. been working on this building ever since, 42 years. My original intent was to see what can be done with recycled things to make a nice, comfortable space that you could utilize. Like the walnut is all blown down, black walnut, dead and down. These tables were made out of flooring that was used, you know, probably 150 years ago.
I came in completely no preconceived notions. I was just out for girls' weekend. And you know, your mind's blown. You drop down into this canyon, you see this building, you come in and you're just like, where am I? My name is Kathy Knapp. I have been a pie baker for 25 years, more or less. But mainly I help my partner, Stanley King, with his Silver Creek Inn.
You get to witness the end, the final piece of a 42-year project of native black walnut from the canyon of Silver Creek, Mogollon, New Mexico. There you have it. I'm not out to, you know, to watch a profit margin grow. I'm happy with being able to survive here. And I think most everybody that lives here has the same feeling. Hey, Niels.
Hello. Many of the cutting boards that I make, I use wood from this area, but it's a mixture. Let's see if we can find one that's all from this area. I have one chair seat I'm working on. See this one. That's that was gonna. This is a mesquite. I was aware of 3 tankers yesterday. I mean, I just grab any kind of piece of wood and then at the end of the day I go up and write it into the calendar.
The other day they came by 8 times. 8 times one day.
On the way going up?
Yeah.
Did you record it?
Oh yeah.
My experience with regulatory agencies have not been too good. So we're pretty much left alone to do the policing ourselves, I guess, you know. The drill sites are currently on private property, although this particular operation has outlined the expansion of this process all the way to the wilderness boundary. So the Gila Wilderness is the first wilderness in the United States. It is the water and air factory of the planet. And I feel like I'm called here in some ways to help protect that. Yeah, hi Bob. And the flatbed came up again, and the other globe truck with a bunch of guys in it. Mm-hmm. We'll talk soon. I'll let you know later today. Okay, bye.
We have had a great community effort here, a network of communication, keeping an eye on the activity at this level. My name is Bob Moore. In my adult career, I worked as a silviculturalist in wildlife biology and in archaeology. My charge has been the protection of the wildlife in the area, particularly the Mexican spotted owl population, since it is a threatened species in this area. If you read the literature that Suma Silver Corporation proposes, They not only want to visit these patented mining claims and see what was left in them, which would basically, to their wish list, would be to open up this entire area. They would also like to extend beyond the patented areas and reach into the Forest Service property where there may still be some residual gold that's still remaining. The interesting thing here is that Forest Service has no jurisdiction to say, no, you can't. Mining laws are an archaic soul. They were made in the mid-1800s to service the Civil War. Those days are gone. Now at this point, looks to be a lot of nature. The land is recovering from what it went through. But 120 years ago, this was one rape and pillage extraction event. If you could visualize, there wasn't a tree standing of any significance at that time. What I appreciate about this landscape is that it is slowly coming back from what this was 120 years ago. There are now 120-year-old trees. You know, it has all the components of stratification of what a ecological base should be. And I would really hate to see that disrupted at this point of the game. Where the opposition may lie is with an endangered species that is protected by a different law that brings in control over what they may do. And if this activity gets to the point it is, it is going to limit where that owl feels comfortable being and foraging in. So that is where you start isolating populations of owls and compromise their potential genetic pool down the line. It's when you see animals in stress that you realize they're not much different than we are. They deserve an ecosystem where they can thrive.
Some people might say, oh man, you're overthinking it, just let them, you know, whatever you got to do, just get out of their way, you know, they're putting people to work, you know, and everything's going to be fine. But at the same time, the likelihood for a spill or a pollution event is high. The track record is not good.
Off to the direct west here is the latest endeavor of mining activity, and this was conducted in the 1980s. All the pollutants are still up there. There's acids and other toxins that are leaching into the soil and moving downstream. Is this the course of action and the path that the state is going to follow? I guess that's to see what plays out.
I think our guests, no matter what their walk of life is, I think they recognize the special part of the space and the wilderness that's outside the door. I think you can't help it. We want to, you know, invite groups to enjoy this sacred space and enjoy the fact that you can get into the wilderness and you could go see a spotted owl if you just had the moment to do it.
600. One more 100. That guy was stacked way high with a bunch of stuff. Looked like empty water containers.
They're hauling stuff out.
That thing
Ooh.
was stacked 3 or 4 high.
What does that mean?
Maybe Nose and Mary Ann will know. They might have seen it too.
Yeah, I'm sure
Oh,
they did.
we should call Cordelia. Call.
She's at yoga today, right? Hi, Mike.
Oh.
Hey, how are you doing? They're carrying a bunch of equipment and bags of bentonite out of here. I know. Tell them, yeah, give 15, 20 minutes, watch for them. Okay, Mike, bye. He said thanks. What's going on?
I have just heard recently that they may be pulling out. If it's in response to the Mexican spotted owl, it is more than heartening to see that perhaps there is a way for the future.
We live in a historic mining town, and I just really hope that we are past that we can turn our attention to the recreational use of this area instead of just tearing it up.
It's not to say that no mining activity should be conducted, but let's get real and get present laws in place.
So long, drill rig, for now. Vicky, hey, this is Stan. How you doing today? Is Bob there? I got a video of them driving it out, actually, from up.
You're our hero, Bob.
You're our guy, man.
You and the Mexican spotted owl.
Yeah, okay, Bob. It's good talking to you and Vicky, and take care. We'll be staying in touch, and have a good evening. Bye.
All right. I am going to post a link in the chat in a moment that will direct you to a petition that we're currently using to generate more attention to opposition efforts to the mine. So if you haven't signed that petition, please do so. I'll also just remind you, if you have questions about the film or the book, please post those in the Q&A feature. And finally, just a quick shout out to Claire Howie, who directed and edited that film. She is an incredible one-woman show, and we are so grateful that she helped us in our effort to make the film. So now we will go on to the panel discussion. I'm going to introduce our panelists. Originally from Chicago, Kathy Knapp planted herself in New Mexico in 1995 when she began the life of a pie lady in Pie Town. In 2001, she accompanied her friend Gail Moore, publisher of Forever Frontier, to the newly opened Silver Creek Inn in Mogollon. A spark was ignited when Stanley King served her a slice of blackberry pie made from berries that grew along Silver Creek. Imagine that. Kathy now splits her time between Pie Town and Mogollon, living her best life in two remote places she feels grateful to call home. She's eager to contribute her energy toward keeping the wilderness wild so that future generations can experience the same transformation she felt on her first encounter with the forest. Joe Sines is owner and operator of Wolf Horse Outfitters. Joe is of Huichol and the Red Paint People ancestry. He provides extensive guiding experience in horseback and backpacking expeditions. His experience extends throughout the American and Canadian Rocky Mountains, Mexico's northern Sierra Madre, and the Alaskan Brooks Range. He shares the wisdom of Apache lifeway teachings in all tours and trips. Joe continues the Apache traditional environmental stewardship of Endebina. Bob Moore has lived in Mogollon, New Mexico for the past 38 years, probably close to 39 at this point, alongside his wife, and they have raised and homeschooled 3 children. Educated in forestry and biology, Mr. Moore founded and managed a company that trained and employed personnel working in the fields of forest silviculture, wildlife biology, and archaeology throughout the Southwest National Forest. Surrounded by nature during most of his adult life, in work and in pleasure, Mr. Moore has an affinity for speaking up for the wildlife so dependent on healthy ecosystems. And finally, Sharman Abt Russell is the author of a dozen books translated into 9 languages. Her Diary of a Citizen Scientist won the John Burroughs Medal for Distinguished Natural History Writing. Her Within Our Grasp, Childhood Malnutrition Worldwide and the Revolution Taking Place to End It, combines her longtime interest in the environment and in hunger. Recent fiction includes the award-winning Knocking on Heaven's Door, an eco-sci-fi set in a paleo-terrific future. Sounds amazing, gotta read it. Sharman lives in the magical realism of the Gila Valley, about a mile from the Gila National Forest. So welcome to all our panelists. We're so thrilled to have you here. So I'm going to start with Bob. Bob, if you would first give us an update on the current status of mining in Mogollon, and then I'm going to ask you a question after you provide an update.
Yes, for the past 2 years, the exploratory company Silver has been drilling exploratory holes during the fall and winter of 2021 and 2022. They have not been able to be in the area during the Mexican spotted owl breeding and fledgling tendency period, which is from March 1st to August 31st, due to the sensitivity of what that could pose as a risk to the spotted owl during that period. There has been 1 year of full survey conducted for the Mexican spotted owl, and there's another ongoing year of survey right now going on for the spotted owl, which is proving that there's a more than viable population of spotted owl in cases as near as a half-mile away from their mining site, from their exploratory drilling pads. As of this year, as of this March, they did submit a modified permit application, which is now to expand their exploratory drillland from approximately 40 acres to over 600 acres, where they would be spreading exploratory holes throughout that area, of which in some areas they'll be further away from spotted owl populations, but in other areas they'll even be closer to known spotted owl areas, up to and including a quarter-mile away from the from where they'll be drilling. So at this point, that permit application, modified permit application, is being assessed by the New Mexico Minerals and Mining Division. There has not been a determination on whether to move forward with that at this time. And that is where that sits at this time.
Thanks so much for that update, Bob. Still plenty to be concerned about. Again, we've got the link to the petition in the chat. Please sign that to help our efforts. And Bob, it just strikes me as a resident of Mogollon for nearly 40 years at this point. Your relationship to place must change over a span of time like that. What elements of the land become most salient, and how have you grown to recognize and appreciate the cycles and seasons of the Gila in new and maybe unexpected ways?
That's an incredible question, in the sense of you definitely hit the nail on the head. If you live in a certain area for so long and surrounded by what we consider nature at the utmost on the front of the Gila Wilderness, you have more of an affinity for nature and the animals that live and survive in your area than perhaps what is going on in society, because you are so strongly connected to the vibes of what is occurring on a seasonal basis, on a yearly basis, the changes that happen, the species that sometimes seem to be more that just seem to be a little bit more pressed in survivability at the time. There's been some comings and goings of migration patterns during those 40 years, some of which I think are telling, and some of them do spill into what one would consider climate change scenarios. And the deal with all this is when you now add a complex thing such as a mining interest coming to your area, it adds kind of a fractured sense of what all is going on in this area. And it just brings up alarm bells of what that is going to do to the survivability of nature and the wildlife around you.
Thanks, Bob. I have to say, in my time working with you, there are so often moments when we're talking about our opposition effort in some way, and it almost feels like you're channeling the owl. I can sense the depth of that connection and the degree to which your time in that landscape and in the presence of these more than human communities really allows you to share their perspective in a really profound way. So we're so grateful for that in this work. Joe, in your piece, you write about how the Apache Northern Stronghold of Endebina has been inspiring human stories of relationship to place and respect for country since long before the Gila Wilderness was a thing. As long as that land has been in existence. I wonder if you could tell us a little more about the Chiricahua Apache history and connection to Ndebana and why it's increasingly under threat, and why it's so important to protect and uplift tribal sovereignty and stewardship in whatever future vision for the land we are advocating for.
Thank you, Leah. To describe or to attempt to describe what Ndebana, how it touches us, how it nourishes us, is a long story. This is very valuable land, not just in monetary value, but valuable land in the culture that was here, valuable land in the animals that used to be here, valuable land in the amount of water that we had, that we were privileged to use, the value of the air, the value of the sky, just extremely valuable all over. Unfortunately for us, that translates into why we had to be removed from this area. Why between the 1850s to the 1880s, such effort was expended to remove us because of that connection. For the last 400 years, 500 years, we have been telling modern society not to do this. We have been begging not to do this, not to destroy these lands, not to compromise the balance, compromise the health that translates to us. Our trade, for lack of a better description, our trade with the creator for this land and the beauty, the value, the abundance that we have here, and even had more, our trade was the responsibility to protect it at all costs. It cost us a lot. It totally broke up our culture. We were separated from our traditional lands. We were sent off. We were imprisoned. We were enslaved. That was the only way they could invade this land and start pecking away at the value of it. Everywhere you go, you can see that value, just as Bob was describing the wildlife, those small animals that make up the greater web of life here. The only way to relate how our connection is in a modern sense for America to recognize. Today I had I do trail rides into the Gila. Today I had a couple from England that came over. I often get visitors, as most of these tourist-based operations. We here in this region, the Gila, New Mexico, we get tourists from around the world. The perception of how our connection to this land has been perverted, has been changed to the point where we're not even able to tell our own story. Other people are telling it for us. So this couple from England, nice couple, they're just touring the Southwest. They're enjoying their visit, and in discussing with them the cultural values, the cultural expressions that we were able to live our lives here. One of the interesting things was the misperception of our connection. The gentleman from England made a comment that he said, well, you tell us, Joe, that you're not nomadic, that you didn't follow animals. So that must mean that you were sedentary. That must mean that you sat in one place for a very long time and that you grew your food. That connection is to me is perverted in that way that says that it is okay to separate a people from their land, that there are other ways for them to survive. I had to remind them that no, our freedom dictated that we were able to travel around this traditional country that we have, not needing, because of our extent of time here, we didn't need to grow our food. We didn't need to grow our medicines, that the land provided that. And so it was interesting to make him understand that connection of, no, you can't put us in a place and say, hey, grow a garden, you'll be okay. Because that doesn't translate to our connection to this land, which means, no, our garden is this land itself. The trees, the grasses, the bushes, the plants, all of that is our garden. So when it comes to controversy regarding how environment is perceived, it's very easy for people that don't understand our history here to relegate us to a Pueblo structure. And we're not. We had a whole different culture of how we dealt with our environment. And there's a reason why we have been trying to impress upon the communities around here about the sacredness of this country. Every part of this country is sacred, but specifically, we have been able to share the stories about that particular area of the Mogollons. It is so sacred and is so powerful that it's not a wonder why Geronimo in their flight, as they're scattering throughout the country, and now all of us, all our groups are trying to survive. Some that went into the northern Sierra Madre, the Apaches that tried to remain in the Gila. We were all running frantically trying to find a place to be safe. And it's not just by happenstance why, as it's documented, that Geronimo's group spent their last free winter in the Mogollons. That just goes to show the sacredness of that country, that if they were going to be killed, that was a place to do it. That was the power of that country, was if we're going to die, we die in a very special place. And there is no other place in the world where we would happily, gladly give that price for trying to keep this land clean, keep it healthy. The elders tell me that the only word that they can remember that was Apache for the Gila is the word Huthli, which means that's where everything comes from. That's where everything emanates from. Personally, you know, it was always a wonder why we end up in the places that we do, why things happen, the reasons that they happen. You know, for myself, it seemed such a small thing, but when I graduated high school, and I don't want to give away my age, but when I graduated high school, the only thing I could think of, you know, as friends that I had that were asking parents for trips to Mexico or cars or things like that for graduating high school, I asked my mom for $40 so I can buy some food and a little bit of supplies so I could come into the Gila. And that was my high school graduation gift to myself, was I came into the Gila and just spent a week just wandering around. I always wonder why I did that, you know, and now I find myself here trying to participate, trying to share, trying to support all these efforts to protect this country, which we have always found, as I mentioned before, we've always found that that's why this country is so special to us, is because it's always asking people, it's always putting the people in a position that says, we're going to do our best to protect you. The balance of this land is the priority. And I have to say that no mining will be good mining here. And we're already experiencing the backlash from placing our positions in the ways that we have done. We are getting ostracized by commissioners. We're getting ostracized by politicians because we've come out and said we support the anti-mine. And so that has caused us trouble already. And so to a certain extent, we're already paying a price for this fight, which puts us again 150 years ago. The racism that has come out over this issue, over our return to this country, that's what I'm going to call it exactly, is racism. The way they're dealing with our names here in this area, it shows a disrespect, and that disrespect is carried over into this land. How we deal with the mines in this country, we need to slow them down soon, fast. And we will continue as we have been for the last 400 or 500 years. Don't do this. Telling these mines to get out of here, go back to Canada. That's what they should be hearing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joe. We are so grateful for your stories, and I hope they continue to bring clarity and uplift what the Apache Nation is doing in the Gila. And if you haven't seen it, Joe was part of the feature story in this month's National Geographic. It is beautiful, so check that out. And his business is Wolf Horse Outfitters. Thank you, Joe. Kathy, clearly your story of how you came to Catherine County, to Pie Town and Mogollon is integral to your love of place and to your ongoing advocacy to protect it. Why do you think the stories of this landscape are so unique? And how do they serve your vision of a transition away from extractive industry to more sustainable economies like tourism and outdoor recreation?
Well, my background in New Mexico is in tourism. I ran a pie shop for a long time in Pie Town, and now I help Stanley at the Silver Creek Inn. And the Gila is unique, and not only is it still wild, but it's accessible, which makes it a key attribute of our state. And it helps with tourism, bringing money in so that we can all continue to stay here where we want to be and facilitate other people coming to see it. Every year there are more visitors to the catwalk, which is, one of the most mind-blowing things you'll ever do. And when people come to the catwalk, then they find the ghost town of Mogollon, because it's only one canyon over. And they see the whitewater mesa labyrinths where you can walk and you can meditate and you can be in nature. And they get up to Mogollon and they can go see a cemetery where there's entire families from the 1918 flu buried in long stretches, and all the miners, and you can't not be affected by all those things. So because my background is tourism, a few facts: outdoor recreation is more than 2.5% of our state's GDP. New Mexico is a top destination for outdoor recreation, horseback riding, Joe, biking, birding, fishing, photography, camping. You can do it all here. You've got the quiet, you've got the nature, you've got the dark skies. The Cosmic Campground, just 8 miles up the road from Mogollon, has Border 1 class, which is the darkest sky you can get, night sky viewing. And astrotourism is booming. People are coming from all over the world to see the Milky Way. It's one of the only places in the States you can still see the night sky and the stars. And so all of those things they're new compared to when I came here. When I came here in 1995, it was pretty much still the wild, wild west and very few amenities. So I'm grateful to have witnessed the growth in tourism and to be a part of I provide amenities to people that would like to come stay. I've been a tourist. I know that thrill of getting off the plane and you feel the air of New Mexico and you see the color of the sky and you're like, why didn't anyone tell me there was a place like this? And so I get to see that thrill in the eyes of tourists now. And I want to be a part of keeping that cycle alive. I'm passionate about elders, children, families being able to go into the wilderness, like with Joe, like I would like to do, and experience that quiet, that nature. You're not going to get it where else do you get it? Maybe you travel around the world, but here in the States, you're not going to find what we have in our backyard. And I am here to protect it. Thank you.
We're so grateful that you're there, Kathy, and that you're holding this vision for the future of this part of the world. I think it's really important to demonstrate that there is a possibility to move beyond extractive industry and that the local communities really see that as their future. So thank you for that.
Yes, I just want to say, if the mining is allowed to happen, all that stuff we just talked about, it goes away because it's, the ripple effect. You take away the quiet, the animals leave. Animals leave, once the birds are gone, it's never going to be the same. So we must continue to fight the good fight.
Yeah. Amen to that. We're all slowly descending into the darkness here. I will turn a light on in a moment. But Sharman, in your essay, A Stone in Our Pocket in First and Wildest, you first correct the oft misquoted Thoreau line, which is in wildness is the preservation of the world, not in wilderness. A lot of people misquote it by saying in wilderness is the preservation of the world. And then you go on to ask the reader, now we ask ourselves in this rapidly changing world, what is the meaning of wild? What will preserve us? So I'm going to turn that back on you now and ask you if you would answer those questions for us in this moment when the loss of a sense of wild feels increasingly imminent.
Okay. Well, I want to say first that I love the Gila Wilderness and everything that it represents. Literally, I can walk outside my door and be there in 5 or 6 hours. And that's such a privilege. I think even more important for all of us, metaphorically, I can enter into the idea of wilderness in my mind, the legal, the social, the political, the philosophical, the spiritual idea of it, which is important, really important in our society in North America. And that's wonderful. But I do think, Leah, yes, that Thoreau's original wildness is the better word. And it's the larger idea in terms of what will preserve us. For historic reasons, we think of wilderness as something designated, which it is. It's relatively small in the context of our public lands, and it's outside our normal life. It's something we travel to. It's something we walk to. And outside our normal life is not something that will preserve us. Wildness,
Sharman, sorry, you just got muted for some reason. Don't know what happened, but.
Right.
Okay,
so wilderness is wonderful. Wildness is a larger idea. It's everywhere around us. It's a force that's constantly springing up. I will define wildness as kind of the natural, healthy processes of the earth, of the universe. But it's not separate from humans either. And I think that's really what I'm going to say is that, and I know this is too hopeful maybe, and unexpected even for me when I say it to myself. But I think wildness is part of who we are. I think wildness is in our bodies. I think it's in our yards. I think it's in our parks. I think it's in our wilderness. And so logically, naturally, in wildness is the preservation of our world, and in wildness is the preservation of the world. And so how do we do that today when, when things seem so fraught and so difficult, when we don't believe in ourselves anymore and we have some good reason not to do that? I mean, one answer is just that we open our senses, we open our windows. There's a lot of wildness going outside my window right now. There's a lot of wildness going outside almost everyone's window. When the native bee comes in and pollinates the native plant that you've helped nurture, that's wild. And there's so many wild things going on in your garden. There's wild insect fun, there's wild plant fun, there's wild soil going on in your garden. But I do want to say that as environmentalists, as conservationists, we can't really just look to our garden. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the bigger picture. When we restore the rivers and the wetlands and the streams that are going through our towns, going through Silver City, going through Portland, going through Washington, D.C., when we restore them, we're restoring, we're on the side of wildness. When we return our agricultural land, our soil to health, to the natural balance of fungal and bacteria mix, and we see how rich it is, and we see how quickly it starts capturing, carbon dioxide, how quickly the rivers start return to wildness and return to riparian health. We're restoring wildness. So, and when we question who can mine and where they can mine and how they can mine, when we question the status quo, when we do what the people on this panel are doing, which is to take action, then we're restoring wildness and we're part of wildness. So, I'll stop. I know it's kind of a hopeful attitude, the idea that we're wild, the idea that we can participate in wildness, and the idea that wildness is more resilient than we can ever imagine. Wildness is what the earth is about. It's a hopeful idea for me. I think hope generates action. And so I guess I just want to end by thanking all the people on the panel and thanking you who are taking action, who have chosen to participate in hope.
Thank you so much, Charmin. You offered so many tools to break down that false dichotomy of wildness and ourselves, and I think that's such an important piece of restoring ourselves to this planet and restoring the planet itself. So I think that's the perfect way to end. And seeing that we don't have any questions, we must have done such a thorough job of covering all the necessary topics and leaving no room for question. This will be recorded and posted on our website, so I'll send around a link to that. And it's just been a pleasure. Always so grateful for all of you. So thank you and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Leah.
Bye, everyone.